Your position here is terminated. Effective immediately, Roland declared, his finger pointed directly at my chest like a weapon. His voice cut through the conference room with surgical precision as 20 pairs of eyes shifted uncomfortably in my direction. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands, suddenly ice cold, gripped the leather portfolio I'd prepared for this quarterly meeting, filled with charts documenting our Pterodo's record-breaking growth. 6 years, he continued, pacing slowly around the polished conference table. And what have we really gained from your contributions? The pause before the last word dripped with contempt. The meeting had begun normally. Coffee cups steamed, notebooks opened, the usual mumbled small talk floating around as everyone settled in. Then Roland had moved to the presentation screen, bypassing the agenda entirely, and locked his gaze on me. "We need someone who delivers actual results," he announced to the room. "Someone innovative, someone who doesn't ride on others' successes." My mind raced through the previous quarter's numbers. My territories had outperformed every other division by 23%. The client retention rate had reached its highest point in company history. 3 major accounts that had been considered untouchable had signed under my guidance. "I don't understand." I managed, my voice embarrassingly small in the cavernous room. "My territories are your territories." Roland's eyebrows arched as several executives exchanged glances. "That's precisely the problem, isn't it? The collaborative approach I implemented is what turned those numbers around. Your resistance to the new framework has become problematic." My throat closed as I recognized the narrative he was constructing. The collaborative approach he referenced had been my creation entirely, a restructuring I designed after identifying critical gaps in our client engagement model. "But the framework was my victor," he interrupted, using my full name rather than Vic, which everyone called me. "This isn't the time for debate. The decision has been made at the highest levels. We need forward-thinking leadership, not outdated methodologies." My vision narrowed as 20 colleagues, people I'd worked alongside for years, watched in silence. No one spoke, no one objected. The room felt suddenly vast and cold. "Be gone by noon," Roland concluded with the ghost of a smile touching the corner of his mouth. "HR will assist with your exit paperwork." I sat paralyzed, my career collapsing around me in real time. 6 years of 60-hour weeks, missed birthdays, canceled vacations, all culminating in this public execution. The projector hummed in the background. Someone's watch ticked. Someone else coughed softly into their hand. Then a chair scraped against the floor. "One moment, please." The voice came from the far end of the table where the junior staff typically sat, almost forgotten in these executive meetings. Nora, my intern for the past 3 months, stood with her laptop clutched against her chest. At 23, she looked impossibly young among the senior staff, her gaze steady despite the tremor in her hands. "This isn't appropriate, Nora," Roland said, dismissing her with a flick of his wrist. "Return to your seat." But Nora was already moving forward, her steps deliberate as she approached the head of the table. "Everyone should see this first," she said, placing her laptop down and turning the screen toward Roland. "It's relevant to this discussion." Roland leaned forward, annoyance etched across his features until he saw what was on the screen. His expression shifted so dramatically it was as if someone had drained all color from his face. He stumbled back a half step, his hand bracing against the table for support. Nora looked directly at him and spoke 5 words that caused the entire room to freeze. "She's standing right behind you." Roland spun around so quickly he nearly lost his balance. There, filling the doorway with her commanding presence, stood Sylvia Vance, the legendary industry pioneer, whose visit wasn't scheduled until the following week. Her silver hair was pulled back in her signature severe bun, her penetrating gaze taking in the scene before everyone. Everyone recognized her instantly. "Vic, you've done excellent work implementing our company's strategic vision, but let's be clear about ownership here." That conversation marked the beginning of the shift. Suddenly, my most successful strategies were described in team meetings as our executive approach rather than Vic's framework. My direct access to senior leadership became limited. Roland began joining my client calls, smoothly interjecting himself into relationships I'd spent years building. During presentations, he would stand slightly ahead of me, physically positioning himself as the authority. When clients praised specific elements of my strategy, he would nod appreciatively and say, "Yes, I developed that approach after noticing gaps others had missed." The first time he did it, I was too shocked to respond. By the third time, I recognized the pattern but struggled to address it without appearing territorial or unprofessional. Then came the account reassignments. First, one major client, then another, transferred from my oversight to cross-F functional teams that reported directly to Orurin. The explanation was always the same: strategic alignment for optimal client outcomes. With each transfer, my performance metrics suffered. Territories I'd transformed were no longer counted in my results. New performance standards appeared that emphasized areas outside my reassigned responsibilities. I might have doubted my own perception, if not for Nora. The intern had joined us 3 months earlier, quiet, observant, seemingly unremarkable among the ambitious young professionals who cycled through our department. She had been assigned to me initially, then partially reassigned to assist Roland as well. "He's systematically pushing you out," she whispered during a lunch break 6 weeks ago. "I've been organizing his files. He's taking your most successful accounts, then changing how success is measured to make you look ineffective." "That can't be right," I said, though the pit in my stomach suggested otherwise. "We've worked together for years. He's always supported my advancement." Nora looked at me with unexpected intensity. "Until you became a threat, until Sylvia Vance showed interest in your work, specifically." That afternoon, I accessed the shared calendar and discovered something that confirmed my worst fears. Sylvia Vance was scheduled to visit our offices in 3 weeks. The calendar entry created by Roland noted presentation of territory transformation strategy and client retention framework. My strategy with my name nowhere in the meeting notes. I confronted him that same day, stepping into his office and closing the door behind me. "I saw Sylvia Vance is visiting," I said, watching his expression carefully. "I'd like to prepare the presentation on the territory framework." "That won't be necessary," he replied, barely glancing up from his computer. "I'll handle the presentation, but it's my framework," I said, the words falling between us like stones. "I developed it, tested it, refined it over 4 years. Finally, he looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Did you develop it using company resources, during company time, with company data?" "Yes. But then it's company intellectual property implemented under my executive direction." His voice remained calm. "Reasonable, your contributions have been noted. Vic, but this presentation requires executive-level positioning. You're taking credit for my work," I said plainly. His expression hardened. "That's an inappropriate accusation. I'm concerned about your perspective lately. In fact, I've been reviewing your recent performance metrics, and there are troubling patterns emerging. Because you've reassigned my successful accounts and changed the measurement criteria," I countered. "This defensive attitude is exactly the problem." He sighed heavily, as if disappointed. "Perhaps we should discuss your future here more broadly. Your approaches are becoming outdated, and your client relationships aren't delivering the results we require." I left his office in a daze. The threat unmistakable. Over the next 2 weeks, the isolation intensified. Team members who previously sought my input were directed elsewhere. My access to certain data systems became temporarily unavailable due to updates. Projects I'd initiated were reassigned for continuity planning. The morning of the quarterly meeting, the day Roland chose for my public dismissal, began like any other. I arrived early, prepared my presentation materials, and reviewed my territory numbers one last time. Despite the targeted reassignments, my remaining accounts still showed significant growth. I believed, naively perhaps, that facts would protect me, that 6 years of documented success would shield me from whatever Roland was planning. I was wrong. As I sat in that conference room, publicly labeled a failure, before colleagues who knew better but said nothing, I thought my career was finished. The humiliation burned through me like acid, rendering me temporarily mute, unable to defend myself against the calculated dismantling of my professional reputation. Then Nora stood up with her laptop. Then she spoke those 5 words that made Roland's face go white. "She's standing right behind you." And there was Sylvia Vance watching it all unfold with those penetrating eyes that had built an industry empire. I specifically requested to meet with Victor, Sylvia said, entering the room fully now, her assistant following with a leather portfolio. I was told she would be presenting the territory transformation framework she discussed at the Denver conference. Roland's recovery was impressively quick. His spine straightened as he stepped forward with an extended hand. Ms. Vance, we weren't expecting you until next week. What a delightful surprise. I was just discussing some necessary organizational changes with the team. Margot ignored his outstretched hand, her gaze fixed on me instead. Miss Victor, I've reviewed the materials you shared after our Denver conversation. Your approach to client-centered territory development is precisely what I've been seeking to implement across my own organizations. The room had gone completely still. 20 colleagues held their breath as Roland's carefully constructed narrative began to crumble. There seems to be some confusion, Roland interjected, his voice tight. The framework Ms. Vance is referring to was developed under my executive direction. Victor merely implemented certain elements. That's not what my records indicate, Sylvia interrupted, nodding to her assistant, who produced several documents from the portfolio. I have copies of the original strategy documents, complete with creation dates and revision history, all authored by Victor. But how? I had never sent Margot those internal documents. They were accessible only through our secure company systems. As confusion washed over me, I caught Nora's eye from across the room. The slight nod she gave me caused the first crack in my understanding of what was truly happening here. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't luck. This was something else entirely. And suddenly, I realized that everything from my humiliation to Sylvia's timely arrival was unfolding according to a plan I hadn't even known existed. As the room descended into uncomfortable silence, I watched Roland's confident facade begin to crack. A muscle twitched at the corner of his jaw, his hands clasping and unclasping at his sides. Perhaps, Sylvia suggested, her voice carrying effortlessly through the tension, we should continue this discussion more privately. Roland nodded quickly, gesturing toward the door. Of course, my office would be more appropriate for not your office. Sylvia interrupted a neutral location, and I'd like Miss Victor to join us. Her eyes moved to me, then to Nora, along with your assistant, who seems quite informed about the situation. Nora is just an intern, Roland dismissed with a wave of his hand. Nevertheless, Sylvia insisted, I'd like her present. 20 minutes later, we sat in the small conference room on the building's top floor, a space typically reserved for board meetings. Sylvia at the head of the table, Roland and I on opposite sides, Nora positioned beside me with her laptop open. Let me be transparent about my purpose here, Sylvia began, her fingers steepled in front of herself. 3 months ago, I began receiving communications about an innovative territory development framework. The strategy precisely addressed challenges my own company has been struggling with for years. As I explained in our previous discussions, Roland started, leaning forward eagerly. I wasn't speaking with you. Sylvia cut him off without even glancing in his direction. The communications came from 3 former clients of yours who now work with my organization. All 3 independently cited Victor as the architect of the approach that transformed their businesses. My mind raced through client relationships, trying to identify which 3 had moved to Margot's company. Ray from the healthcare division, maybe Hazel who'd left for a senior position somewhere last year. When I met Miss Victor in Denver, Sylvia continued. Her explanation of the framework confirmed everything I'd heard. That's why I reached out to schedule this visit to discuss potentially implementing her methodology across my organization, possibly even bringing her on board as a consultant. Roland's smile had gone rigid. While Victor has certainly contributed to our success, the framework, your strategic direction. As I was explaining to the team before your arrival, we're making some organizational changes to better align with our future goals by firing the creator of the very strategy that caught my attention. Margot observed dryly. Performance issues, Roland insisted. Recent metrics show. May I? Nora interrupted, turning her laptop screen toward Margot. These are the original performance metrics for Ms. Victor's territories before the recent adjustments. Roland's head snapped toward Nora, his expression darkening. Those are confidential internal documents. Accessing them without authorization is grounds for immediate termination. Nora's face remained impassive. I have authorization. As Miss Victor's assigned analytics support, I have legitimate access to all historical performance data. You were reassigned to my office 3 weeks ago or encountered. Partially reassigned, Nora corrected. I maintain my original access permissions. Nothing I've accessed falls outside my authorized scope. Something in Nora's calm precision gave me pause. The timid intern who had watched silently from corners now faced down an executive without flinching. Who was this woman, really? Sylvia studied the screen, scrolling through what appeared to be years of performance data. Fascinating. According to these records, territories under Ms. Victor's direct management consistently outperformed all others by significant margins, until approximately 7 weeks ago, when several key accounts were suddenly reassigned. Strategic realignment, Roland insisted, and coincidentally, Nora added, pulling up another document. These reassignments began precisely 3 days after Ms. Vance's office first contacted the company about Ms. Victor's framework. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Sylvia turned her penetrating gaze to Roland, who had begun to sweat visibly at his temples. It appears, Margot said carefully, that I've interrupted quite an orchestrated scenario. This is being grossly mischaracterized. Roland protested, his voice strained. These are internal matters that directly impact my interest in your company's approach. Sylvia finished for him. I came here specifically to meet the innovator behind a strategy I consider revolutionary. Instead, I witnessed that person's public termination by someone now claiming credit for their work. She turned to me. Miss Victor, I'd like to continue our discussion about your framework without interference. Would tomorrow morning be convenient? My hotel at 9? Before I could answer, Roland stood abruptly. This is highly irregular. Any discussions about company methodologies must include executive leadership. Mr. Brenner, Margot said, using his name for the first time. I believe Miss Victor's employment status was just terminated in front of 20 witnesses. Unless that decision has been reversed, she's free to discuss her expertise with whomever she chooses. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. If Roland rescinded my termination, he'd have to explain to leadership why he'd attempted to fire a valuable employee. If he maintained it, he'd lose control over Sylvia's interest in my framework. There may have been a misunderstanding, he said finally, visibly calculating his options. Perhaps we should postpone any definitive decisions about Ms. Victor's position until after a more thorough performance review. How generous, Sylvia remarked, her tone making it clear she recognized the transparent maneuver. Ms. Victor, my offer stands regardless of your employment status here. Thank you, I said, finding my voice at last. I'd be happy to meet tomorrow. As the meeting concluded, Sylvia departed with her assistant, leaving the three of us in a silence charged with unspoken threats. Roland's eyes had gone cold. Any pretense of mentorship or collegiality vanished. This isn't over, he said quietly. You've made a serious miscalculation. He left without another word, the door closing firmly behind him. I turned to Nora, seeing her clearly for the first time. Who are you really? I asked. And what just happened? Nora closed her laptop, her movements deliberate and controlled. I'm exactly who I said I am, your intern, but perhaps with a more specific purpose than you realized. You engineered this entire scenario, I said, the pieces falling into place. Margot's early arrival, the documentation, the timing. Not entirely, she said with a slight smile. I simply created the opportunity for truth to emerge at the right moment. Why? You've been here 3 months. You barely know me. Nora studied me for a long moment. Do you remember Julian? The name struck me like a physical blow. I watched her walk away. This unassuming young woman who had orchestrated what might be either my professional salvation or my complete destruction. Because despite Sylvia's interest, Roland still held significant power within the company, and he'd just been publicly humiliated by an intern and the employee he'd tried to discard. Men like Roland didn't forget such things or forgive them. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of uncertainty. I returned to my apartment, mind racing with questions about Nora, about Julian, about what Roland might be plotting in response to the day's events. I prepared materials for my meeting with Margot, unable to fully focus as the scene from the conference room replayed in my mind. My phone remained conspicuously silent. No calls from colleagues expressing support or seeking explanations, no messages from HR regarding my employment status. The isolation was both telling and terrifying. At 8:30 the following morning, I arrived at Margot's hotel, choosing the side entrance to avoid being seen by any potential company representatives in the lobby. As I approached the elevator, a hand caught my elbow. "Not that way," Nora said, appearing beside me as if from nowhere. "There's a service elevator that will take us directly to the executive floor." "You're coming to the meeting?" I asked, following her through a maintenance corridor. "I've been here since 7, she replied. Setting up, Sylvia requested my assistance with some technical details. The service elevator opened to a private hallway leading to what appeared to be the hotel's premium suites. Nora led me to a door at the end, knocking twice before entering. The suite had been transformed into an impromptu meeting space. A conference table dominated the main room, covered with documents and multiple laptops. Margot sat reviewing materials while two other people I didn't recognize worked at separate stations. "Miss Victor," Sylvia greeted me, standing to shake my hand. "Thank you for coming. We have much to discuss." For the next 2 hours, I presented my territory transformation framework in detail, explaining the methodology I developed, the problems it solved, and the results it had delivered. Sylvia and her team asked insightful questions, probing the limits of the approach and its applicability to different market segments. It was the most thorough, respectful, professional exchange I'd experienced in years. No one interrupted me. No one attempted to claim my ideas as their own. No one dismissed my expertise or questioned my authority on the subject I'd mastered. "This is precisely what we need," Sylvia concluded as we finished. "Your approach addresses the exact challenges we've been facing with our regional market penetration." "Thank you," I said, feeling a weight lifting from my shoulders. Perhaps there was a path forward after all, away from Roland and the toxic environment he'd created. "I'd like to offer you a position," Margot continued, "heading our client strategy division. You'd have full authority to implement your framework across all our territories with appropriate attribution and compensation." The offer was beyond anything I could have expected. A significant promotion, presumably with a substantial salary increase, working directly with an industry legend. "That's incredibly generous," I said, stunned by the opportunity. "I would be honored to accept." My phone buzzed with an incoming call, the screen lighting up with company HR director. I hesitated, looking at Sylvia. "You should take that," she advised. "It might be important to your decision." I stepped into the adjoining room of the suite and answered the call. "Victor, this is Brenda from HR," came the clipped professional voice. "I'm calling regarding yesterday's incident at the quarterly meeting." "Yes," I prompted when she paused. "The executive team has reviewed the situation and would like to meet with you this afternoon. They've placed Roland on administrative leave pending an investigation into certain allegations that have come to light." My heart raced. "What allegations?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, but it appears there may have been a pattern of inappropriate behavior regarding intellectual property attribution and performance evaluations." "I see," I said carefully. "And my position?" "That's what the meeting will address." Brenda replied, "But I've been authorized to inform you that the termination announced yesterday has been rescinded. The company is prepared to offer you a significant promotion and compensation adjustment to retain your services." The rapid reversal made me suspicious. Just yesterday, I'd been publicly fired. Now they wanted to promote me. What had changed in the interim? "What time is the meeting?" I asked. 3:00. The entire executive leadership team will be present. "I'll be there," I promised, ending the call and returning to the main room where Sylvia waited expectantly. "Interesting development," she inquired. "They've placed Roland on leave and want to meet about offering me a promotion," I explained, still processing the whiplash-inducing shift. "It seems convenient indeed," Sylvia agreed, "almost as if they've suddenly recognized your value now that another option has appeared." Nora, who had been quietly working in the corner, looked up from her laptop. "They received notification of Margot's job offer to you 30 minutes ago. An anonymous email detailing the terms was sent to the entire executive team." I stared at the woman. How could anyone know the terms? "Margot just made the offer." The terms were determined yesterday, Nora explained. The email was scheduled to deliver regardless of whether you accepted immediately. I looked between them. Realization dawning. You're working together. This whole situation, Margot's interest, the job offer, the timing of the email, it's all part of some coordinated plan. Not a plan, Sylvia corrected. A correction, a rebalancing of scales that had been deliberately tipped against you, just as they were tipped against Julian Ross and others before. How many others? I asked, a chill running through me. 7 that we've confirmed, Nora answered. All men, all credited with innovative approaches that Roland subsequently claimed as his own. All eventually forced out through systematic isolation and manipulated performance metrics. And you've been tracking this pattern? I asked Margot. Not initially, she admitted. My interest in your framework was genuine. It was only after Nora contacted me with evidence of what was happening that I recognized the broader meaning. Nora contacted you? I turned to my supposed intern, who met my gaze without apology. After Denver, she confirmed when I saw Oruran beginning the same pattern with you that destroyed my brother's career. The pieces were coming together, but something still didn't make sense. Why go through this elaborate scenario? Why not just report Roland's behavior to HR or the executive team? Because men like Roland rarely leave evidence that traditional channels can address, Sylvia explained. They operate in gray areas. They cultivate powerful allies. They control narratives. By the time conventional processes catch up, careers have been destroyed and innovations lost. So what happens now? I asked. Do I take your job offer or the company's promotion? Margot leaned back, studying me thoughtfully. That depends on what you want, Victor. Justice, advancement, vindication, something else entirely? I considered the question carefully. 6 years of my life had gone into building my career at the company. I'd created something valuable there, something that worked. But I'd also witnessed how quickly it could all be taken away, how little protection existed against someone like Roland who knew how to manipulate the system. I began, then paused, realizing what truly mattered to me. I want to ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Not just at our company, but anywhere Roland might go next. Nora and Sylvia exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. That, Sylvia said with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her, is exactly what we hoped you would say. We've been gathering evidence for months, Nora explained, opening a folder on her laptop. Not just about what happened to Julian, but a systematic pattern dating back over 5 years. She turned the screen toward me, showing a timeline meticulously documented with emails, performance reviews, meeting notes, and account reassignments. 7 men's names appeared in sequence, including Julian's and now mine, each following an identical pattern: initial support and mentorship from Roland, followed by gradual isolation after they developed something valuable, culminating in either resignation or termination. How did you access all this? I asked, stunned by the scope of the documentation. I didn't need to hack anything. If that's what you're wondering, Nora said, everything here was obtained through legitimate access channels. Roland's mistake was thinking no one was watching or that someone with an intern badge was beneath his notice. But this still doesn't explain why Sylvia got involved, I said, looking between them. This goes beyond professional interest in my framework. Sylvia's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. The first name on that timeline is Eleanor Finch. She worked under Roland at his previous company before joining mine 8 years ago. My eyes widened. You contacted our clients? Not directly, Nora said. Let's just say information has a way of finding the right people when properly channeled. Additionally, Sylvia added, an investigative business journalist received documentation about the pattern of intellectual property misappropriation within your company. They're preparing a feature story for next week's edition. But the most immediate concern for your executive team, Nora continued, is that 3 former employees, including my brother Julian, have engaged legal counsel regarding wrongful termination and workplace discrimination. Their attorneys contacted your general counsel this morning. The strategic pressure points were perfectly targeted. Clients, public relations, and legal exposure all activated simultaneously. No wonder the company had suddenly discovered my value. So the meeting at 3:00, I began. Is damage control? Sylvia finished. They need you now, not just for your talents, but to demonstrate they value the innovation you represent, to show clients, the press, and potential litigants that they don't have a systemic problem. What exactly are you suggesting I do? Nora smiled for the first time, a genuine expression that transformed her serious face. Whatever you want, that's the point. For once, you have all the power in this situation. We've created the circumstances, Sylvia said. How you use them is entirely your choice. I sat back, contemplating options I'd never thought possible 24 hours earlier. I need to think. Of course, Sylvia agreed. The car will take you home and return for you at 2:30 if you decide to attend the meeting. Either way, my offer stands. As I gathered my materials, Nora handed me a small USB drive. Everything we've discussed is here, along with additional documentation you might find useful. Whatever you decide, you should be fully informed. The drive felt surprisingly heavy in my palm. The weight of secrets, evidence, and possibilities all contained in one small device. Thank you, I said, looking between them. Both of you. Whether this was about justice or revenge or something else entirely, you've given me choices I didn't have yesterday. Sometimes, Margot said as I reached the door, the line between justice and revenge is simply a matter of perspective. The executive conference room fell silent as I entered precisely at 3:00. 9 people sat around the table. The entire leadership team minus Roland's CEO Gregory Thorne rose to greet me, his typically intimidating presence softened by what appeared to be genuine concern. Victor, thank you for coming. Please have a seat, he gestured, to the chair directly opposite the power position, I noted. Not the subordinate placement I would have been assigned yesterday. I set my portfolio on the table along with Margot's sealed offer letter, placing it prominently where everyone could see the Vance International logo. I understand there have been some developments regarding my employment status, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Yes, Gregory acknowledged, glancing at the offer letter. There appears to have been a serious misunderstanding at yesterday's meeting. We want to assure you that Roland's actions were not authorized by this leadership team. I see, I said, and you've placed him on administrative leave, pending a full investigation, confirmed Amira from HR. We've already begun interviewing team members about his management practices, including past employees. I asked. A flicker of discomfort passed between several executives. We're expanding the scope as needed, Brenda said carefully. And my position? Heron leaned forward. We value your contributions enormously, Victor. The territory transformation framework you developed has revolutionized our approach to client engagement. My eyebrows rose slightly at the unambiguous attribution. So different from yesterday's narrative. To demonstrate our commitment, he continued, we're prepared to offer you a significant promotion. Senior Director of Strategy Implementation, reporting directly to me with a 40% salary increase and expanded team resources. The offer was substantial, though still below Margot's, but more telling was the direct reporting line to the CEO, bypassing the entire management layer where Roland had operated. That's generous, I acknowledged. May I ask what prompted this reevaluation of my contributions? The uncomfortable silence that followed told me everything. They knew about the client contacts, the potential media exposure, the legal threats, and they were scrambling. We've been impressed with your work for some time, Gregory attempted. Recent client feedback has only reinforced our appreciation of your innovative approaches. Recent as in this morning? I asked quietly. Heron's facade cracked slightly. Victor, let's be frank. We've received concerning information from multiple sources today that suggests we may have or overlook certain issues within our organization. We're committed to addressing these comprehensively, starting with retaining me now that I have other options, I observed, tapping Sylvia's offer letter. Your value to this company extends far beyond recent circumstances, Heron insisted, though his eyes remained fixed on the Vance International logo. I opened my portfolio and removed a document I'd prepared during the hours between leaving Sylvia and arriving at this meeting. I've outlined some conditions for my continued employment, I said, sliding copies toward each executive. I'd like to discuss these before making any decisions. As they reviewed the document, expressions ranged from surprise to discomfort to grudging respect. My conditions were extensive, full attribution for my framework, review of all performance evaluations conducted by Oruran over the past 5 years, establishment of an intellectual property attribution protocol, and creation of a mentorship program specifically designed to support men in strategy roles. These are substantial requests, Harlan said finally. They're requirements for my continued employment. I corrected, along with a public acknowledgement of my contributions to the Territory Transformation Framework in all client-facing materials. The CFO, Wallace, who rarely spoke in these settings, cleared his throat. These programs would require significant resources. The mentorship initiative alone cap would help prevent the company from losing valuable talent, I interrupted, and potentially avoid expensive legal actions like the ones being prepared by former employees. The mention of legal action silenced further objections. Gregory studied me with new awareness, clearly reassessing the situation and my unexpected leverage.